Welcome to TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are going to do that look into custom supplier connections and their catalog downloads into your AIM inventory. This is going to be kind of an extension of what we've already covered a couple months ago, kind of building off of what we learned with the supplier connections in general with all the suppliers that we here at TriTech have partnerships with in various industries that we kind of specialize in. But your B2B or supplier connection service also gives you the ability to take any third-party supplier catalogs that are in an appropriate format, typically an Excel spreadsheet, and tweak those so that they can be pulled in to AIM's inventory without you having to submit it to us for approval or having to do anything on our end. You can do this as often as you like with as many supplier catalogs as you like. As always, a little bit of housekeeping. Over to the right side of the screen, next to the playlist is the chat tab. So you can click that chat tab and then down below, click the nickname button to sign into our chat system and say hi. Hello, Devin, as always. Glad to see you here once again. That way you can ask questions of me. You can interact with each other and help each other out if you would like to do so. But love to see you here, and great to see you here week after week and month after month. So let's go ahead and switch over to my AIM system here. Hopefully I've got this a little bit easier to see. I've been playing around with some of the settings here, just trying to get everything perfected. You'd think after X number of months of this I would have it down pat, but nope, I always got to keep toying with it. So like I said, this is going to be building off of everything we've talked about in months past in the supplier connection service. So hopefully you have taken the time to refresh yourself. That video is available in all of the Active E playlists as well as the recent live streams. Although it's not recent, it would be several months past at this point. But I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the individual details of actually pulling in the data. I'm just going to give a quick refresher. So as hopefully you are all aware, when we're talking about pulling in data from any catalog, whether it's direct from the TriTech catalogs that we're given or through this custom supplier process, you will be going through and you will be setting up category relations. The categories are the inventory categories in this case. The suppliers will have their own category structure. You have your own internal AIM inventory category structure, and you're just going to be basically combining the two and mapping those up accordingly. You'll do the same thing with attributes. Attributes are extra fields. For example, in the music industry, these might be details like arranger, composer, sizing, frequencies, voicings, things like that. In the firearms industry, it might be details like caliber, barrel length, capacity. In the vacuum and sewing industry, these might be details like the amperage of your vacuum cleaner or the capacity of the bed space of the quilting machine or whatever it might be. Again, it all depends on whatever industry you're in. You'll also be doing the same thing with manufacturer relations. So combining the Yamahas of the database to the Yamahas in your system, and so on and so forth. Or for example, Smith & Wesson, again in the firearms industry, it might be S&W in one system, it might be Smith and Wesson in the other system, it might be Smith ampersand Wesson in the other system. You're just going to pair those up so that they all point to the same manufacturer and they don't duplicate themselves. And lastly, you would do the price relations to set up the formulas for taking whatever prices are available from the supplier, such as cost, MSRP, and potentially MAP, and pushing those through formulas to come up with your own in-house pricing, where that might be a margin or a markup percentage, either or, of the supplier's cost. It might be a percentage of that retail. It might be a percentage of the MAP price. So you have the ability to set all those up on a category by category, in some cases manufacturer basis. So that's the overview of supplier connections as a whole. Now I want to dive into how this works from a custom supplier perspective. So you would go to that Active E menu underneath maintenance, and you would go to custom supplier setup. And I don't have, I'll be quite frank, I don't have an example spreadsheet to work with, but I want to kind of give the overview of how you can take any data that has enough information in it and apply it to these algorithms so that you can then use this to pull that data in, either for new inventory releases or things like price updates, whatever it might be. If the supplier has it to pull in, wonderful. Let's go ahead and work with that. So when you first come in here, this will be an empty screen. And I've got one in here just to kind of get us started. But the main idea here, and I'm actually going to click down here to the Add button just to kind of start from scratch. If we look up here at the top, you'll see it's going to ask for a supplier number. Now you have the ability to give it a number from anywhere in the range of 7,000 to 9,999. Doesn't matter what the number is, but you will want to keep that in mind in a few minutes. So you just give it whatever number, and let's just say we're going to give this 8,000. Then you're going to give it a supplier name. And of course, hopefully the supplier name is pretty straightforward. It might be, let's say, Davidson's or Harris Teller or Callaway, or whoever the supplier is that has the spreadsheet that you are getting. Now that spreadsheet could consist of data that they sell themselves. It could also be a catalog of data that they turn around in wholesale, that they buy from other suppliers and then they turn around and they sell through to you. So they're more of like a broker or a wholesaler. Doesn't really matter. We just want to make sure we give this a name. So let's call this Acme Corp. MC Corp? Acme Corp. There we go. And then we're going to go ahead and save that. So you'll see that appears now over here on my list to the left. Now once we've done that, we can go here and we can import supplier categories and manufacturers. Now this would be pointing to a file that you would get from the supplier. And if the supplier catalog already meets the criteria of our default spreadsheet structure, wonderful. But I can guarantee you it's not going to. Every supplier has their own way of organizing the spreadsheets, naming these columns, things like that. So, almost assuredly, you're not going to be able to go straight to this option of importing these categories and manufacturers. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to do an intermediary. Now down here, you'll see there's this table labeled Establish Column Mapping. And when we're talking about columns, we're talking about your spreadsheet columns in the Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to uncheck this little option here that says Use Default Columns, and we're going to take a look at this. So we can see that all of these column names here correspond to a column in your Excel spreadsheet that you get from the supplier. Column A is going to be the supplier number, and most assuredly that is not going to exist. So no matter what, if nothing else, you're going to need to add a column A. You might notice there's a little asterisk here next to this supplier number listing. The asterisk implies that this is a necessary column, and furthermore, you can see down here, hopefully, that it mentions column A must be the supplier number. So no matter what, you won't be able to actually override this first column. You could click in here, but it's not going to work. You want to make sure, if nothing else, you leave this first column as column A. By the way, this whole idea here is whatever you have in the override is where AIM is going to look for that respective data, irregardless of the default column. So we expect, for example, the model number of the product to be in column B. And prior to this type of system, you would have actually had to go in and rearrange the columns physically in the Excel spreadsheet from the supplier. You would have had to find the model column, and you would have had to drag it to column B. So you would have to rearrange and manipulate all of these columns. Not so anymore in version 12. You can come in here and you can say, okay, from this particular supplier, Acme Corp, their model number is in column C. And we could just put that right into that field. You'll notice that model technically is not a necessary field. It is the SKU that is actually necessary. See how it's got the little asterisk next to it. If the supplier's data does not happen to differentiate between a model and a SKU and an item number and things like that, you can actually have the same column be in multiple columns in this case. So for example, we're going to take whatever is in the supplier's column C and put it into our respective model, SKU, and item fields within the AIM inventory record. And you would basically just go right down the list and map the data accordingly. And like I'm kind of saying, it's tied specifically to this given supplier name. So the whole idea behind this then is when you down the road get updated and refreshed data from the supplier, more than likely, or at least hopefully, knock on wood, it's going to be in that same format. So about the only thing you might ever have to do is come in and add a column A to it. You'll notice if I come up here to this original custom supplier, these columns down here are saved specifically to the supplier here, and if we go back to Acme Corp, you can see these are now all column C here. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know over in the chat section if it does not. I'm going to go down this list and just point out the fields that absolutely have to exist in order for this process to work. So I've already mentioned supplier number has to be there. Let me see about opening up an Excel spreadsheet. I want to show a little shortcut that you can do to add information to a spreadsheet. So this is just a blank one here. It's probably not the best example, but let's just do something like this where we've got a bunch of records with data in it, and just to throw some stuff in there. So now back here in column A, what you can do, if we recall that Acme Corp's supplier number is 8,000, what we can do here is we can come into the first column A. Normally you might have to right click in here and insert a column A so that everything moves over one. So you might have to do that. Let's just kind of get this back there. And no matter what, this needs to be 8,000 in every record down this list. So what you can do is in the first cell, you can put in 8,000, and then you'll notice if I take my mouse cursor and kind of put it right here in the corner, this changes from the cursor here of like a type in or fill in the field, kind of changes to this black plus icon. If you double click on that, that will just go right down the list and insert that supplier number in every cell in column A all the way down through to the last record. So that way you don't have to go through and manually do it for every single record or line item. You can just fill it in on the first cell and then double click on it to bring it all the way down to the bottom cell. So again, you'll definitely have to do that because most assuredly the supplier is not going to have that information there. But hopefully that can save you a whole lot of time when it comes to inputting that data in. Casey is asking, do we have to map every column? What if the supplier sells SKU 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, 7, 8, 9, but we have them as variations under the model A, B, C, D? We'll be talking about that momentarily, actually, Casey. But thank you so much for the question. So, getting back to this listing. So again, that's the supplier number. The other absolutely mandated fields that you have to have from the supplier are a SKU record, a manufacturer, a description, a vendor category, And that's actually it. You can kind of see we've got a bunch of other fields here, but they are not necessary. And that means that, getting back to your question, Casey, if, for example, the supplier doesn't have barcodes on their records, no need to have to worry about mapping that. You can simply come over here and leave that override or blank out that override so AIM knows not to expect to have to pull in that barcode record. It will basically come in blank. And if that's the case, AIM will take whatever the SKU is and use it as a custom barcode for the purposes of the built-in barcode printing and labeling. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on this vendor category because this is very important. In a lot of the databases that I have seen, the vendor doesn't necessarily label it as a category. Sometimes they might label it as a department. Sometimes they might not label it at all. Sometimes you might have to come up with some kind of category structure to successfully import this data in. So if it's not there by name, look for it by what's the word I'm looking for? Look for it by intention. In other words, whatever is in a column that kind of organizes the inventory together, that's what we're going to need to use for the purposes of a vendor category. Because if you recall, one of the things we have to do is we have to create category relations. Basically what we're doing is we're going to be able to take this data and we're going to be able to put it through your normal supplier catalog process. You're going to be able to come up here and view the category relations, create the manufacturer relations and price relations and so forth from this supplier data. And that way it works just the same way as any other direct supplier. So that way it's not an all or nothing scenario. You can go through and you could take all that data from the supplier and say, okay, we're interested in this category, but not these categories. So you can map those accordingly. So you want to make sure that data is there. If it's not and you can't find anything that is an equivalent of that, you may have to either A, come up with something on your own, or B, you might have to either pull it all into kind of like a throwaway category. You might actually want to, at that point, go in, and one of the things I've suggested to do, this is kind of a last resort, but one of the things you could do is you could go in and you could create a category and a subcategory and call it like a TBD or a need to process category and subcategory, so that you could then go back through and take those records after they've been imported and then put them wherever you need them to actually go. But again, I kind of recommend that as a last resort. If at all possible, if the supplier is willing to work with you, they may be able to resupply you with a new spreadsheet with a category structure. It just may take a special request. I mean, no matter what, this behooves the supplier to A, organize their inventory, and B, make it so that you can easily pull this in, because the easier it is for you to pull in and process in your system, the easier it will be for you to purchase that product and track it, and then ultimately make both of you money, you as the retailer and the supplier as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go back to where we were with the custom supplier setup. So again, vendor category, very important. Once you've basically gone through and mapped these fields, then you can then point the import program to that file. We would have to save this, of course, and then you can point it to that file. You can see now it's saying we're only necessarily recognizing that A is going to be a supplier number. Everything else is going to go off of this custom mapping. You would then find that file, go out and pick it up wherever it might be, and then import it. And once it's imported, you'll then be able to go in and view the category relations just like you would a normal supplier, do the manufacturer relations, do the price relations. And then ultimately, once everything is imported and mapped, you will then be able to go to the Active E update AIM inventory routine, which then would allow you to go up and click the Get Inventory button. You would find that custom supplier on this list, you would highlight them. Let's pretend Xander's is a custom supplier in this case. And then you would want to make sure to change this type from our ActiveE web service to the custom XLS spreadsheet. Once you click Get Inventory, it will then ask you to reselect that original spreadsheet file. And once you do that and click the Import button, it would go through and then it would find all of the data that meets the relations that you have set up. They would then be listed here for you to be able to update and pull in. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm sure there's going to be a plethora of questions here, so that's the basic gist of it. Once it's then imported, it follows the same rules as our normal supplier relations process. All the yellow records would be brand new items that you could then pull in. All of the green and red items would be items that get matched by either SKU or barcode, which is another thing, Casey, getting back to another part of your question. If the supplier sells SKU 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, but you have them as variations underneath a model A, B, C, D, as long as they both have something that they can agree upon, which in most cases is going to be a barcode, a UPC, then it will find those matches by that barcode record and it will update those existing details of those records as opposed to wanting to create new ones. Now, again, this is going off of the concept that they both have a barcode. If there is no barcode and the supplier has data that is technically already existing, but there's no way for it to be able to match that to those existing records, then you may have to do some house cleaning afterwards, which, if that is the case, there are routines in the utility menu to go in and merge SKUs when you find them. You can come in here and you can select the SKU that you want to, in essence, remove. Select the SKU that you want that to get merged into, and then it will combine all of those records, the sales, etc., into the one record. So we do have a utility to help clean that up if necessary. But if you don't have the barcode, you'll probably have to do that. If you do find any essentially duplicate SKUs that are just of their own variations. But if they do have barcodes, then not a big deal. It'll find that match and then just update them accordingly. Devin is saying, none of our suppliers provide SKUs. You generate SKUs in AIM. Can we have the program generate SKUs in the ISS format for us automatically? Devin, that is a great question. If they don't have it in SKU by name, they might have it in SKU by concept. So as long as there's some kind of item number that's in that supplier spreadsheet, it doesn't have to be in SKU by name, but you could map it to the SKU column. So if it's an item number, or if it's a catalog number, or a product code, or however they might organize their inventory, as long as there's something like that that can be used to identify one item from another, you can then map that to that SKU column. If there is nothing like that, I'm afraid AIM really doesn't have the ability to generate SKUs for you through this process. We'd have to probably open up a ticket on that if it's something like that. But hopefully they have some kind of product code, even if it's not necessarily a SKU. Because otherwise I guess I would have a hard time believing that they wouldn't have some way of identifying one product from another product in their system. Again, that's the basic gist of it, though, is just going through and just mapping these accordingly. Again, if some of these data fields don't exist in their spreadsheet, for example, there's no map price or cost or things like that, just simply leave these columns empty. And of course, if they are in another field, and maybe they're labeled differently. Maybe, for example, what we call cost, the supplier calls wholesaler price, or whatever it might be. As long as you can find the equivalent of that column, you just come in and you change the override field to be whatever it needs to be. Casey is asking, when we update prices under locations, it does not also update the prices for each individual serial number. 99% of our vendors, such as Kahn, Selmer, Yamaha, etc., want us to update both prices at the same time to meet MAP policy. Is there any way to sync the locations and the serial prices by default? Once again, an excellent question. Let's take a look at the settings here in the supplier setup. Now, as far as the supplier setup is concerned, let me drag this down to the right monitor. When it comes to serialized SKUs and serial numbers, let's just see if there's any settings in here for that. So there's definitely the recalculate pricing for existing inventory. You'd want to make sure that you've got this check marked for you so that it will update the pricing no matter what. And I would think, yeah, I don't know if there's a setting in here. I don't see one specifically to serial numbers specifically. So if you do need it to update existing serial number price points, what I would almost recommend is to give our support team a call and kind of run the scenario by them, see if maybe there's a way for us to come in here and add a setting to also update serials that are attached to those serial SKUs that you could then do for that. So hopefully that will be all that would be needed if we are talking about price updates through these supplier downloads. Getting back to Devin's question, our suppliers have MPNs, which we put in the MPN field, but we have our own custom SKU. If we could match MPNs but generate a SKU if no MPN match is found. So if you are using your own SKUing system, then I guess what I would almost then recommend, Devin, is to give our support team a call, because this sounds like a pretty custom thing that we would want to do for you. Because yeah, there is no way for AIM at this time to generate SKUs on its own. Doing this import process essentially is what it would be. I would say let's see about maybe. Well, actually, let me ask this, because this will probably be a question that we would need to talk about. Is do you just use the ISS function for the SKU, or do you actually have a system for skewing your inventory, like having certain letters and number combinations be in a certain order for the purposes of knowing what department it's in or things like that? Because if that's the case, we would have to make sure that that is something that we kind of take into consideration. But if it's just a matter of clicking the ISS button, we might be able to do something for you in that scenario, where we could have maybe a setting. And this is just me thinking out loud. I'm by no means a developer, so I'm talking way above my pay grade. But maybe having an option back in that supplier setup area, either at the supplier setup or the custom supplier setup, having an option to override the SKU field specifically with an ISS number. Because if that's all that you're doing, I think we could do that fairly easily. And again, I'm probably talking way out of my element, but I would think that we could do something like that for you. And I see you are using the ISS for SKUs. So if both Casey and Devin, if you both need the serial numbers prices to be updated, I haven't tested that specifically, but if the implication I'm hearing is that it does not update existing serial numbers when these price points get downloaded and pulled in. So if that is the case, what I would almost recommend is both of you to give our support team a call or use the online managed AIM support cases function to input new cases here. You can use this routine. I think I might have mentioned this in other live streams, but you can use this to come in, and of course now it's too big to fit on that window. But you can use this routine. I'm going to have to kind of hold it here because it wants to jump to my other monitor. But you can use the add button in this program to, maybe I can get it to fit here. No, I guess not. But you can use this program to go in and add a case and put in a feature request case. There we go. So you can click the add button here, and then it will ask what type of case is this, and you could ask it for a feature request, and then ask if there would be a way, especially for you, Devin, maybe putting in two cases, one for asking if the existing serials can be updated on that location by location basis, and SKU update pricing basis, as well as a second case to see if there would be a way for it to override the SKU information with an ISS option as they're getting imported. So yeah, hopefully this has been helpful. I see that we're at the end of the broadcast time, but I do have a few minutes if there are any other questions that I can help with. In the meantime, let me go ahead and, as always, kind of talk about the upcoming schedule. So next Tuesday, and I don't have that in front of me, but I know we definitely have a live stream going on that day. And you probably see it easier than I do, just over on the right side screen here, clicking back to the playlist option to see what that broadcast is. It completely escapes me at the moment what we will be discussing on that Tuesday. But then the table is wide open as far as February. So if you have any ideas on what we would like to cover for your benefit in February, after this broadcast is over or at any time thereafter, go and click on the poll option up at the top of this window, where you can then submit your ideas for live stream topics that you would like to see me discuss and talk about, and we can have conversations and discussions about, because I want these to benefit all of you folks, as well as everyone that can watch these afterwards. So yeah, hopefully this has been helpful. Again, this is a building on of what we discussed in a previous session on the supplier connections. So definitely go back and watch these two in tandem. I will be putting the link to this recording not only in the recent live streams video, but also back in the Active E playlist as well. So that way they can be watched back to back on that Active E playlist. I hope you all are able to make it a wonderful day, and we will see you next Tuesday. Take care.